Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, here in New York City. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, watching Cloud Expo out there on the World Wide Web. We have Duke Skarda up next. That is from the Planet, and I'm not going to cut into his time. We have many sessions still to go before you earn your right to our welcome receptions. Please give it up. Duke, take it away, sir.
Good afternoon. Am I on? Great. It's good to be here today. It's good to finally be at the Cloud Expo. This is the fifth one of these. I don't know if any of you have made some of the others, but I have not been to one of the Cloud Expos previously. In fact, if you had asked me about 10, 12 months ago, my definition of the cloud, it would have been quite different than what I'm going to talk about today. I've recently joined a new company that I'll tell you about in just a moment. And my view of the cloud has changed a lot in the last 10, 12 months. So this is a very dynamic space that we're talking about. It's the latest thing for our industry, for the IT industry. I assume most of you are here with an IT role of one sort or another. So it's great to be here to talk to you guys today. And let me start, before I dive in, by talking about the company that I'm with and who I am. I'm the Vice President of Development at a company called The Planet. We are an IT hosting company. We've been around for a little over a decade. We have almost 50,000 servers under management and almost 20,000 customers. And about nearly half of our customers are international. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about comes from talking to our customers about what they're looking for in the cloud. We're in the middle of development of our own cloud product, which I'll briefly touch on towards the end here. What I really want to talk about today is just different ways to think about the cloud. There is an awful lot of hype, and we are at an entire conference devoted to the cloud, which is great. There's a lot of good stuff about the cloud. But for those of you who have been around the IT industry for a while, and as I look around, I see just as much gray hair as I have in the crowd. So I think you guys have been around a long time and know that our industry, we love to look for the latest silver bullet. We're innovators, we're inventors, we like to solve problems for our clients, whether they're internal or they're outside of our company, and we love to develop new things. And when we get a hold of something that seems to have legs, we pump it, and we pump it up big. And there's usually good stuff there, but if we go back to, in our memory, I think back to, whenever I first graduated, object-oriented programming was the big thing, and Smalltalk 80 was all the rage. And as a new gun out of school, I thought it was going to solve world hunger. And it was great. And it's still probably my favorite language. It's a beautiful language to code in. But the more we developed in that, and as it became mature, we started getting bigger and bigger business problems. And lo and behold, we had to integrate it to these things called mainframes. And we had to integrate it to software developed in C. And it became difficult. So we kind of moved away from Smalltalk and we moved into Corba. And Corba was the next great rage. And I went to 2 or 3 conferences on Corba. And it was going to be awesome. And it was great. But it became obvious that developing a simple, tiny adapter for my software was pretty hard. And all the magic inside the orb didn't work quite like what we thought. So then we moved on from Corba into SOA and service-oriented architectures. And we were going to be able to drag and drop these things, and the adapters were going to be made for us. And then we moved on from that, as that became difficult, into BPM, which is still fairly high. It's kind of dwindling now. But business process management, we were going to turn it all over to our users, our internal customers. And they were going to be able to change their processes on the fly. And when they did that, that was going to talk to SOA, and it was going to change our integration. All of these things were great. But we all went through this, this hype curve that Gartner talks about. And, it's interesting if you place where we are in the cloud today on that hype curve, we're still in the great expectations phase, which means there's a trough of disillusionment phase coming, and none of us like that trough. That's an ugly trough. So what I want to talk about are some ways that maybe you can get through that trough. And let's think about the cloud, and what is it going to do for us? And if you read your email from the vendors, which a lot of whom are here, and a lot of the great products that are out there. But, the marketing guys at the vendors, and I brought my marketing folks with me, and those marketing folks like to say things a certain way. There's a lot of hyperbole out there and a lot of confusion. If you read all of that, the cloud, all by itself, is going to give us zero CapEx, no software, and it's going to do it all with disaster recovery built in and instant failover, all at a lower cost. And the skeptics in the audience might wonder if that's true. And there's one quote that I put up here. It's in small font from a website. This is from a real website, from a vendor that I use. So I'm not trying to make fun of them because I actually like the product a lot. But I think it's a good example of what I'm talking about. If you read, when you use any app that runs in the cloud, you just log in, customize it, and start using it. That sounds great. Sounds like a 5-minute process or something, and boom, you're up and running. So, yeah, that's a lot. And I don't think there's one solution that can do all of that. That's an awful lot to put on one 5-letter word, the cloud. So the problem set is pretty broad. The promises are even broader. The term is too loose. So I think simplicity and specificity is kind of how you're going to get value in the cloud. So I'm not going to talk through the 3 categories of cloud computing. I just want to throw them up there because I'm going to throw some examples at you in just a minute. And probably most of you know these 3 categories, but for those in the room who don't, I think it's good to just kind of reiterate. There's kind of 3 major categories that we've sort of coalesced around as an industry. Software as a service at the top end, where you don't really install anything. You just buy usage of a software product that exists in the cloud somewhere. Platform as a service, we heard about from the previous speaker just a little bit. That's where you kind of have an environment in which you can create software. And in that environment, it's a platform. And you build your stuff in it. I'm going to talk about it a little bit more in just a minute, but you don't have to worry quite as much about the infrastructure beneath it. And then finally, there's infrastructure as a service, which is where my company really focuses in. And if you really think about it, some of you go back far enough as well, know that the cloud, as we think through this, isn't even all that new of a concept. So for the skeptics in the audience, it's really not a brand new thing that we're talking about. A lot of these concepts really go way back. And the previous speaker in the breakout session was talking about in here how really a lot of these concepts go back to the mainframe. In fact, if you look at some of the virtual machines that are out there, they're called hypervisors, the things that sort of run the cloud. That hypervisor term is straight from the mainframe books of like the early 70s. So a lot of what we're talking about isn't new, but it's changed a lot. And the world around this has changed. So I think there is good news in all of this hype, even though we're at the front end of this curve. I do think there's a way to kind of shortcut your way to productivity and to get to that area out there where you can make great use of the cloud. And I don't think you have to wait either. I think there are great ways to make use of it today. So the key, I think, is to be specific. So we're going to go through 6 quick use cases. The first 3 are kind of classics. They map to those software as a service, platform as a service, infrastructure as a service, those categories. And then I'm going to talk about 3 more juicy examples. So first, small office or small, medium-sized business back office. Let's say you're a sales guy and you've been working at car sales for a long time, and you've worked your way up to management, and you're just dead certain that you can do it better than the guy that you're working for, the owner of the company that you're with. So you want to strike out and start your own car sales. But you're not a technology guy. You don't really know anything about how to manage your Quicken books, and you don't really know how to install software to manage your customers. Well, this is a great opportunity for a SaaS, like set of SaaS products. There's a number of products out there that will manage your sales community for you. You can manage all of your leads and your opportunities and all that stuff on the internet. And you really can kind of log in and configure it and go. Pretty simple, and you're very much tied to the business model of that provider. You can even take that all the way to your accounting, and you can get QuickBooks online, all of that. So you can do a lot as a SaaS provider. Simple example, but you can do a lot, as a SaaS user, as a new office. It's almost like you can get a startup in a box. You can even get all of your HR stuff that way. So it's great, but you're very constrained to the provider's business model here. Next example, let's look at what you might be able to do with a platform as a service. So I know a couple of people who have actually done startups this way. And you get a new idea for how to do something. Typically in this world, you're kind of focused on a user community in a lot of ways. So the example that I would give here is you've got a new way to present bills, electronic bill presentment. And maybe you know a lot of the people, the industry you want to focus on uses Salesforce.com. They have an interesting platform called Force.com, and you can log in there and you can use their proprietary language called Apex, and you can develop an application in there. And you can get there pretty fast. It really is pretty quick to develop software this way. But it's even more constrained than the previous one. You're very constrained to the platform and the technologies that those guys offer. So you really have to pick your user community well and your supplier well there. But you can get up and running quickly. So this is kind of that middle layer. Let's get to the more difficult stuff. We get to the infrastructure as a service. Infrastructure as a service is what most of what we're going to talk about this week is about. I know that there's a lot of vendors of the other two layers here this week, but most of when you hear about the cloud, it's typically focused on infrastructure as a service. So we'll start with an easy one here, and we'll call it scientific grid computing. So pharmaceutical industry maybe, and you've got some simulations that you want to run. Scientific simulations are notoriously long. They take a lot of compute power. Back in the old days, people would spend years just developing a computer that would run these things, the Crays and whatnot. Big supercomputers used to do these sorts of things. Now you can really distribute that workload pretty well, and you can do that in the cloud. You can pick an infrastructure provider that has a good API set to it and can scale to your needs and allows you to pay as you go, ideally on an hourly basis, where you can build one central server that sort of manages everything, let it via APIs fire off messages to the cloud to set up a new server, apply this image to it, and you're up and running on a new server. And you can do that, you can scale up to your 200-300 servers over the course of a couple of weeks, pay for what you need, scale down, and it all goes away. And it's a great use of the cloud. So another simple example. So those three examples are very simple. They're kind of classic examples of the cloud. And they're all true, and you can get a lot of value there. But most of the people in this room are probably not in one of those three situations. Those are kind of niche situations. So let's move to something that's a little more common for an IT manager or director. You've got a data center, and that data center is running low on space. And whether your data center is in colo or you've got it on raised floor, in your own site, eventually we all run out of space. And then you're faced, until just a couple of years ago, you were kind of faced in with the decision. Do I build more space? And where do I build more space? And, how much is that going to cost? And you have to make a big business case to your boss and to the CEO. And you got to go get a lot of money, a lot of CapEx to go build new space. Well, the cloud does offer you a new way to do that. You don't have to build space anymore. You can leverage infrastructures out there, and you can just expand your data center out into the cloud. Now, I think you should probably be choosy about what you put out there first, kind of test the waters and kind of get used to how it all should operate. But in the end, I 100% believe you can do this today. Some of the things that you have to think about now in this example, though, in this scenario, are very different than the three scenarios that we've talked to. In this scenario, you really need great security. You need security to run your simulations out there, certainly, but this is different. Now there's a pipe coming directly into your data center from that cloud. You need good bandwidth from that cloud. You've got to have great VPNs and good management across it. It'd be great if you had management tools that spanned your internal infrastructure and that cloud infrastructure so that you could manage all of it in one tool set. And you probably want to consider the cloud in this scenario for disaster recovery as well. Once you begin to have cloud computers and you begin to get used to it, now you can begin to segment that across geographic lines, and so you can have good disaster recovery plans built into your cloud. All of this is much more complex than the three examples that we gave just a moment ago, and it's going to take a lot more work from your IT department to pull these off. Here's a little easier one, but I think one that's maybe more powerful, one that's more readily available to people. We actually do the demo environment. We have several customers who do this with us today. So the example I give here is an independent integrated software vendor who does the integration of maybe an ERP package. Part of a great sales pitch for these guys, for consultants like this, is to put together a demo environment. So for 3 weeks, you're going to spend a lot of time at your customer site, getting requirements, learning their language, and you're going to customize a little world that they can do their demo. So you can do a demo as part of a sales pitch in. Well, that's 2 to 3 weeks, and you probably want to start with kind of a standard image, so you can kind of build version 1.5 of your ERP platform focused on the telecommunications industry, and you can store that image away over here. And you can have a whole bunch of those types of images focused on different industry verticals, based on different platforms, and you can store them. And when your sales guys, hit a live customer, and they're ready to put together a demo like that, they can just spin up a new environment, take that image, get it ready to go, spend 3 weeks on it, do the demo, and when they're done, they can either tear that environment down, or if the sale goes well, they can begin to migrate that into the development environment, become a test environment. So, not as much DR requirements here. You don't really need an API to manage this. You want a good portal, but you need a good image library, and you probably want good bandwidth so that you can make sure that when you're downloading a large database to this thing, it all comes up fine. So different use case, but still infrastructure as a service. Final one that I'd talk to is production web application. Production web app is where the rubber really meets the road for a lot of our customers. This is where you have an application that is your 24/7 moneymaker. The example that I would throw out for this would be something like a ticketing website. A ticketing website has a standard level of functionality and usage throughout the course of a year. Every month you're selling tickets to events in your venue. So you have kind of a standing need. You probably don't need a lot of cloud services for that. You're not going to expand and contract too much for that. But you do need to have great SLAs. So this is a great, kind of traditional hosting environment application. But for most vendors, ticketing websites, if you're lucky, every now and then you get some great things that come through your venues. I was in Denver. I lived in Denver several years ago. And when I was there, the Rockies made it to the World Series. It was great. It was an awesome run. I'm sure a lot of you watched that from afar, and it was great to be there. I got to go to a lot of great ball games that year. And leading up to the World Series, they talked a lot about the platform and how they were scaling it up so that they could sell all these tickets. They kept all of us off of the website until 8 a.m. Monday morning or whatever it was. And, who knows how many, 100,000 people hit that thing at 8 a.m. and by 8:02 it was down. We didn't see it again until like 2 days later. So, you're going to have these spikes as a production web. That's what you want. You hope for good success stories like that. But you got to be able to manage that and be able to scale that sort of dynamically. So for a good application of the cloud in that scenario is you've got a standing bed of servers that are always there and up and running with your databases running on those. But then you can spike up. And whenever you're going to have 2 weeks of heavy sales, you can spike up and you can have a dynamically created bed on top of your static servers. So I think the common term for this is hybrid, and we said certainly what we call it internally as well. You get a hybrid scenario here. A couple of other instructive things that you can think about in a hybrid scenario. There are certainly applications that are good for the cloud, if you will, and applications that aren't great for the cloud. Databases, in the scenario, in the way that we're kind of architecting our product internally, databases are something that are great for a standing server, a good dedicated server. A lot of I/O requirements, a lot of data that's just there all the time. You're not going to be moving that stuff around a bunch, and you kind of want to know that the I/O is going to be solid all the time. But the web front end is great for the cloud. So you got to find a way to sort of marry your way into both of those sides of your architecture and have a good infrastructure provider that will allow you to do that. In this kind of world, you want really great SLAs, great support. You want to know that when you call them, that there's a guy sitting there waiting for your call to answer that call and help you with a problem that you have right then. You probably want a good portal. You want to be able to track usage. You want to be able to start your servers and stop them via a good portal. You might want APIs, but most of the time we see here that people are doing this kind of manually, and they're hands-on managing this product. One last thing to think about here is what we call scale up versus scale out. And the concept here is just to know the architecture that you're that your cloud provider has sort of underneath the covers, so that you know whenever you're scaling, if you kind of want to scale up in your server, you know that you're going deeper within that same server. Same IP set, all that sort of thing, versus kind of going outside of that server and maybe going across geographical boundaries. You know, whenever you get too dynamic an environment, you kind of lose a little bit of control as to how that thing is being scaled out. So you just need to pay attention to that. I think you can solve all of those problems with, you know, sort of whichever provider you go with, but you need to be aware of those differences in architecture. So let me show you a picture, transition a little bit to how we think of it as a service provider. The main instructive point from this picture is that there is a huge variance in how all of these 6 scenarios map as a service provider. We've got a number of different axes that we look at sort of internally, and we went back and forth on what the best ones were to kind of demonstrate this point. The x-axis in this one is sort of the frequency of change. You know, off to the right there is extremely volatile. So applications off at that end of this demo environment where you're going to pull it up for 3 weeks and shut it back down. Or an even better example, kind of more classically, is that scientific grid computing example where, you know, maybe on an hourly basis the number of servers required might triple or double and then cut back in half again, up and down and up and down. On the left side of that x-axis, pretty static. You know, that small business guy that I talked about, he's probably not hiring 100,000 people and then firing them, and you know, he's going to be pretty stable in his needs. The y-axis there, just the demands that you're going to place, the number of resources that you really need, and how quickly you can change that with that x-axis. So again, the point here on this slide is that there's all of those 6 examples, while they're pretty simple to sort of understand, depending on what you as a customer are looking to do, they map very differently to the architectures that I as a service provider build. So when you're out shopping, make sure you know what you're looking for. And you know, I hope that kind of going through these, you're able to sort of put your scenario into a use case and say, okay, this is sort of how I need to use the cloud. And here are the 16 things then that I need to go look at. I'm not going to go into all those 16 things. I know there's a lot of other sessions this week that are going to talk to that. I think later today is, you know, how to pick a cloud. And I have a colleague from the Planet who later in the week is going to go through a little more technical view of what I'm talking about here and how to translate that into the, we call them primarily 6 different components of a cloud that you need to consider when you're out looking at a cloud and how to compare them. And again, I'm really talking about the infrastructure cloud here, not so much the SaaS cloud. So I'd like to conclude with just sort of the way that our customers look at the cloud. We've done a lot of polling of our customers, and we've looked at how they use our existing products today. And the thing that we hear back resoundingly from them is that they want to be able to choose the combination of servers that they want to execute their solutions. They want a strong hybrid environment, the ability to mix and match servers, server sizes, server types on the dedicated end, with various virtual server sizes on the cloud side. And they want to be able to do that dynamically. So the product that we're putting together at the Planet is going to allow our customers to be able to do that. You'll be able to also order kind of the same sort of managed services that we put on all of our dedicated products onto the cloud products as well. We don't have that cloud product out today. You can look at announcements that will be coming out over the next couple of months. In fact, one of our first announcements today was with one of our partners in all of this, the Linux Foundation. We're going with a KVM as our hypervisor, which is a fairly new approach. I think there's a couple of other vendors out there that are doing that as well. There's different types of hypervisors out there, and a lot of discussion and debate about which ones are best and which ones are, you know, better for what sorts of environments. We believe that the KVM hypervisor is a great solution for us and for our customers. It's tightly integrated into the Linux kernel, and it's part of the Linux releases that come out. So we get all the same updates that come out as they come out with the rest of the Linux providers. So that announcement came out today. There will be others to follow over the course of the next couple of months. We have a beta program going now that has over 500 beta customers, and we are going to soon we're going to open that up to some more beta customers. So if you're interested in being part of our beta program, you're welcome to drop by our booth out in the hallway there. A couple of other key things about our product is it's SAN-based on the back end, so we can provide an enterprise-class storage solution to you. We'll support both Linux and Windows as client OSs, and it's based on kind of the latest round of CPUs and storage devices that we've got. So with that, I'll conclude, try to get us back on schedule, and say thank you.
Thank you. Duke Skarda from the Planet. What conference organizer does not like a speaker who ends on time?